and welcome back to my channel. I'm Deziel and today I'm showing you how to assemble this cute little top for the summer. I'm telling you right away, I did the pattern and I graded from extra small to extra large and I place it in my Etsy boutique. Once all your pieces are cut in a knit fabric, you're going to place your two back together face to face and you're going to overlock your center back together. Here I'm going to insist in using the 4-thread overlock because it does make a stretchy point, and this is usually 7mm or 5/16 of an inch, and this is exactly what I put on my pattern. Now that your back is sewn, you're going to take the collar piece. You're going to fold it lengthwise like this, good side against good side. You notice that we have notches pretty much in the middle third. This is going to be the front area, and now you're going to overlock from the notch to the other notch. Now when this is done, you're going to take your small long piece, you're going to fold them wrong side with wrong side, and you're going to do a stay stitch close to the open edge, like at 2-3mm or 1/8 of an inch, just to hold them together. You're going to do stay stitch on all 3 small pieces. Now that your little pieces are done, you're going to take the smallest of the 3 pieces, the one that has a notch in the middle, and we're going to sew it to the V-neck of the front. On the right side of the front, you start at the little extension or the seam allowance, just like that. Turn, you might have to stretch a tiny little bit to reach the center, and then at the notch you turn, do the same thing on the other side, and finish with the little corner. Now I just sewed the stripe to the front in the V neckline, but I forgot to mention that when you do cut your front piece on fold, you need to do a tiny little notch about 3mm long or maybe 1/8 of an inch in the V. It will be useful to keep the piece straight. Once you did sew the little stripe, just make sure that you have no hole, that you grab everything. The notch wasn't too big. Just make sure and fix it if you have to. Then we'll do the overlock. Now we could take the collar and turn it to have it on the right side. Once you have it like that, you're going to bring the 2 center back together, right side with right side, and you're going to overlock the 2 center back together. Now you're going to take your back on the right side and take the front, put it face to face, so good side with the back. Align your shoulder, and now we're going to go overlock both shoulders together. Now you're going to take the collar piece. We did overlock. Now you're going to send the seam allowance in one direction on one side and in the other direction for the other side. You're going to fold it. So I have wrong side against wrong side. Align the seam and you will see that it's going to be easy to do a stay stitch from the notch where the seam allowance come out easily like that. You're going to do your stitch or stay stitch all the way until the other side to keep both layers together until the notch. Now when your shoulder are sewn, you're going to take the two little stripes that you have left and we're going to sew them to the armhole. Place the side where you did the little stay stitch next to the edge of the garment, and since there's a little bit to ease in, the garment is bigger than the stripe, place both hands and you'll see that I'm going to stretch so the excess is going to be distributed evenly, and I'll do that on the plain machine for both sides. Now I take just a moment to talk about the finishing we did for the armhole and for the V-neck. This is the option A that I talk about in the little document for the sewing of this pattern. But I also propose you two other ways you could finish the neck and the armhole. The option B would be the use of the bias folder. And this is my favorite finishing. So you could do the bias at both place, armhole and neckline. The third option would be the use of the marrow edge or the tiny overlock that makes a round stitch. Now what we're going to do, we're going to overlock both of the armhole. Now we're going to do the side seam. Put your front and your back right side with right side. And I suggest you start your seam or your overlock at the bottom. Go all the way to the top and go slowly when you're at the underarm because we do have the thickness. So you go slowly to make sure that your piece, they don't move. We're going to overlock both side seam. Now I did my two side seam with the overlock, and for the one that have problem to sew the thickness with the overlock, I suggest you go on the plain machine, just sew for the width of your little stripe here, just tack maybe two little seams. It's going to make this area more flat and you will see it's going to get much easier when you go overlock this seam. Now when the overlock on the side seam are done, you could right away do the overlock on the fore part of your hem. Now once your hem is overlocked, you're going to do the corners. There is 4 corners like that, and I did a mitered corner, so it's going to give you a very nice finish and it's very easy to do. So just fold your fabric right side with right side. You do the same thing for each of the 4 corners. You fold and you're going to sew at 7 millimeter or 5/16 of an inch. You sew a straight line. Now we're almost done. We have the collar left to put on the neckline. So take the collar and place it where you have the little corner coming out, where the seam allowance start with the beginning of the stripe of the V-neck. So place them together like that. And then you're going to place the center back matching the seam on the collar. So seam with seam. And see, you have to pull a little so you could ease in the excess you have on the neckline. And you do the same thing on the other side. So the other little corner with the beginning of the little stripe, right like that, and you pull to sew them. We'll do the seam on the plain machine first, and we'll overlock right after. Now what we're going to do is just a little tack to hold the seam allowance at the underarm. So what you do is you send the seam allowance towards one side or the other, and you're going to do just a little tack for the width of the little stripe. It's going to look just like that. When underarm tack are done, you're going to do 2 more tack, this time at the neck. We're going to do the tack, sending the seam allowance or towards the bottom or towards the top, just to hold the seam allowance in position. So send it one direction and just do a little tack. Now the last thing to do is for sure the hem. I ask you to sew 4 corners like this one. Now you're going to hold the seam allowance open and turn it. You're going to do that 4 times, and you'll see you'll have very nice corner, and it's going to also be an indication for where to sew or the width of your hem. The hem should be more or less 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch. I say more or less because it all depends on how wide you did your seam here. If you did a wider seam, you'll have a wider hem. And if you did the opposite, a smaller seam, you will have a narrower hem. But it's going to work anyway. There you go. I did the little tack, so my little summer top is finished. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I see you next time.